Welcome to the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. I am joined by Insanity is Free, or as we study in libertarian circles, everything's subjective value. So insanity is subjective value. Jeremiah Haridng from Agorist Nexus. Check him out, especially during these midterm times, if you think that the so-called controlled opposition wave is actually going to do something. And we have Harrison Wells, who is a freedom fighter as well. And we're going to wish him good luck on his town hall where he's going to get weed, hopefully marijuana, legalized. That being said, there's a few things I want to bring up. The first thing I want to bring up is the midterms, because I know a lot of people are talking about that. And a lot of people, to me, are falling into this like behavior of, well, oh, it's bad, vote red. And I'm pretty sure back in the day with Bush, I heard just vote blue. And then people were just saying just vote blue with Trump and just vote red with Obama.
I am so ready to jump on that, especially after I'm all fired up. I'm all fired up tonight because
my argument is this: Naomi Wolf is not an anarchist that I know of. She's not anywhere in my sphere or the bottom strip, as Jeremy would say. She came on a show. She's actually, I think, like a reformed feminist type person, which you can kind of figure out where exactly she stands. I don't know.
I think she's still a feminist, from what I know. Okay. I think she just believes that the feminist movement has lost its way and doesn't actually address women's rights issues anymore, and is more concerned with parroting like Democrat talking points and shit. While there's a great genocide of babies. Her words, not mine. YouTube, don't censor this, but a great genocide of babies and children because of totally safe and effective vaccines. The vaccines are safe and effective, and they aren't genociding babies and kids. And you definitely shouldn't look into an article about why she thinks that, because that would be wrong.
Yeah, that'd be wrong. There's scary beer flu. It sure is scary, and it's a beer flu. And we like the medical procedure and all that fun stuff. But she came on a show. She's a feminist, not an anarchist by any means. Came on and said, look, with all this red wave stuff, even if I'm gonna even say all the people who say they're cheating is wrong. Let's say there's no cheating whatsoever. You'll get the people in, they'll come in with like some good ideas maybe about liberty. And then over time, they will become corrupted just like the people they're trying to fight. For me, the red wave, essentially, even if it does succeed, will end up creating a bunch of kings who have rings on their fingers, and give it 2 years and they'll become Nazguls. I think that's why Tolkien, who to me is actually or borders on anarchy, I think we can all.
He died an anarchist.
He died an anarchist, yes. I think Jeremy would agree with me. I guess his idea was this: you give people
Tolkien would agree with you, at least. Like he self-identified that way.
Yeah, Tolkien even said, I find myself leaning more and more towards anarchy. The most improper job of any man is to boss, even saints, is to boss other people around. And 1 in a million is not capable or going to do it well, least of all who seek the opportunity, which I think he's 100% correct. To me, what will happen with this red wave, if there's no cheating even, is people get in, maybe they'll have some good ideas. The institutions will corrupt them because it's a monopoly on force. And over time, they'll become the exact thing they're fighting against, because when you have a monopoly, well, you just tend to behave differently without incentives.
The people who are red who get in will be picked by the establishment or are not a threat to it.
And yeah, but occasionally you get some people who slip through. Like I do like Thomas Massey.
Ooh, one out of a fuck ton. He's got such a powerful voice. If you're a tiny minority in Congress who always gets shut down, except to be the useful idiot whipping boy for the establishment, you're doing a great job. You did it.
I was actually going to jump in on why. So, liberty-leaning people who want to vote Republican will constantly use Massey as like the example of how this is like totally a thing that can absolutely work. And it's actually, Thomas Massey is the best example of why this is the dumbest idea ever. Because like Thomas Massey, like I'm going to be honest, like I love Ron Paul. Everyone knows this. I'm still pretty unimpressed with Rand Paul. I think Thomas Massie is probably the best person in the federal government right now. And yet, for all his principle, Massie was almost ejected from the entire Republican Party by that obese moron Donald Trump because he called for a recorded vote on the biggest spending bill in the history of humanity. If you see that and you still think voting Republican will move us in any particular direction whatsoever, if it will get you anything different than voting Democrat, you are an idiot. You're a moron.
But you know who isn't a moron? Donald Trump. He didn't do that because he was stupid. He did it because he's corrupt and hiding things enables corruption.
That's a very reasonable critique. That's
the reason he ended the drone mandate that Obama put into place that said you had to report how many drones you use. And that's also the reason Biden hasn't put it back, because he's like, thanks, Donnie. You let me drone more people unaccountably.
Okay, so...
And there's the fact, even if, I'll even say, let's say you get a bunch of Massies. There's still the special interest groups, right? They didn't go away. Big Pharma didn't go away. The MIC didn't go away. You still have the intelligence agencies who, in my opinion, they're going to do what they're going to do. I don't think the CIA is probably like, oh, who's the president? Whatever.
Yeah, they don't care. But
they don't care.
Also, though, just to operate in the real world for a second, right?
It is the real world.
How many of the Republican candidates that are running for national office are Thomas Massie tier? I can tell you right now, 0.
Or
none of them.
Well, how about this? If you have somebody like Thomas Massie and he acts as a sort of anesthetic toward the kind of person who would like authentically rebel from a rightist position, sort of like the Bernie Sanders of the Republican Party. And when you have people like him in, not even Thomas Massie is the Thomas Massie of Republicans, because he's their fucking dancing puppet that says, hey, this is the crazy kooky position, so we'll just find somewhere to moderately land.
It's the crumb. It's the crumb they throw to the radicals.
Panem et circenses, ordo ab chaos.
You'll never get
order out of chaos.
You'll never get more than one, because his whole role is to be that one crazy guy.
I've looked at a lot of the Republican candidates.
If you say Blake Masters, I will actually Oh my fucking God. Okay, so I live in Arizona. Listen, I love Jeff Deist and the Mises Institute, but they are calling this one so fucking wrong. Blake Masters is running as a MAGA Republican. The fact that he was a libertarian 10 years ago means nothing whatsoever. There is absolutely no reason to think that he has a libertarian bone in his body.
Chris Cantwell was a libertarian 10 years ago.
Exactly. Okay, this is actually another thing. I think we should dig into the paleo strategy more broadly, because I'm getting kind of tired of these guys.
Paleo strategy.
So, yeah, very. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan.
Are you a fan of Carrie Lake? I'm guessing no.
Carrie Lake's a shitty person and a fake and will be not a good governor. I kind of hope she wins in the same way I kind of hope John Fetterman wins Senate in Pennsylvania, because she is a she is a kook, and I think she delegitimizes the institution in like a red pilling way. That being said, like, no, she won't be a good governor. Did you see her on Malice? She's the same TV reporter she always was. She literally reads off a fucking index card, and that's the only answer she can give to anything. Okay.
Which is hilarious, given the fact that one of the most popular libertarian podcasters says that he's shredding the 3x5 card of allowable opinion.
Exactly. So
where we get that, just like, ooh, now we only have allowable opinions. Like Thaddeus Russell isn't a pedo enabler. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So
I have to torch it. Fuck that.
Okay.
Piece of shit. He called me an imperialist for saying pedophilia is gross. All right. So Harrison, what were you going to say?
Okay. So on the topic of the paleo strategy, right? Tho Bishop, right? Because we're all on Twitter, probably too much, right? Tho Bishop's been pissing up a storm. starting fights with all the LP people and all the like non-voting people of
why am I not surprised?
Yeah, for what, like arguing basically why libertarians should support the GOP. And here's why he's fucking incredibly wrong. For one, the paleos and a lot of Hoppians believe that to have a libertarian future, we must first have a right-wing future. These are like hard right culture warriors. And while I'm not on that side of the culture war, like I don't care if you have right-wing cultural values. That being said, holding that as a prerequisite for a society of non-aggression is fucking stupid. And I'm not like a Hoppe hater, but none of these people have ever even attempted to justify why right-wing cultural values are a necessary part of a libertarian future. It absolutely is. It's a total non sequitur. It does not follow.
I think what happened is Rothbard tried to work with the left, then he tried to work with the right. And my thing is, you just do what I like the Scott Horton strategy: attack the left from the left and the right from the right, and see what values you can get that lean towards liberty.
I agree, but I think to do that effectively, we need to forge a third cultural path that puts liberty as its central value. We are never
being consistent.
Yeah, we're never going to get anywhere by grifting off right-wing cultural movements. And just because Rothbard was friends with some conservative people in the 90s, like that's a terrible way to dictate your entire strategy.
No, I'm not saying it's good.
So that's just one thing.
Like
the foundational assumption that we must have a right-wing future first and then a libertarian future, I disagree with.
Would you be open to the fact that, okay, I'd agree there. I would say, because I look at things at a very technical level, I'm okay with saying, though, let's have a minarchist society before you decentralize everything to know how the decentralization will work. Is that bad?
Yes. I do not believe in a transitional period. I would obviously be happy if we lived in a minarchist society. Like I'd be if we lived in a minarchist society, like I wouldn't be ass mad. Like, no, you have to get rid of all the government. No, but like, in terms of practice, like I don't think like I don't think the path to liberty is reducing the size of government.
I guess in a funny frame. I'll put it in a funny frame. It's like, all right, hey, I got the call from President Smith, Senator whoever. Heck, I don't know. Maybe I'll run for Congress just to be there. Right. Senator May said we're defunding all the Pentagon and everything. What I need you to do in each state, infantry, is make a Discord server here. I need you to make a server for the Navy. I need you to do that. I need you to just kind of organize, militias on the Discord. Militias. And I'll give you 5 to 6 months to get that all done. That's kind of how I see it. Like you kind of I look at things technically, and that's probably why I like leasing.
If that was a thing that was happening, I would probably be okay with that, I guess. My challenge to that would be like, that is not how we get to that end goal, because that's never going to happen, because we will never actually elect people of enough principle and in enough numbers to decrease the size of the state.
Maybe.
I don't think that will ever happen. I think I think if the size of the state is going to decrease, it will be a natural pressure. Like they will make mistakes that will be their own undoing. Like Dave Smith becoming president is not how we get to minarchy and then anarchy.
But how many mistakes do they have to make? They've destroyed health, in my opinion. They've destroyed the currency. They've destroyed, just.
Yeah, but I'm also like, I don't know. I know you guys kind of disagree with me on this, but I'm like super white pilled. Like, I think they've made the mistakes already and we're already on the path.
I am not, but I also agree with everything else.
I am in the middle.
But anyways, hold on. Because I really want to go off on the fucking paleos right now. Okay. So the other thing, because I was gonna say earlier, I'm really fucking fired up tonight because last night, like right after a bad night, right before I was going to bed, I listened to Scott Horton on The Naturalist Capitalist, right? And Scott fucking went off. So now I've got to go off because he made some really fucking good points that I want to sort of bring out further. The entire America First movement is such pussy bullshit. It is fucking fake, man. And the fact that there are libertarians who think that we can just kind of like grift off their underbelly and catch the people they leave behind, and that will be a successful strategy, that is insane. For one, okay, the right, these people who vote for the GOP, they are voting for a fucking aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. You can see the aesthetic. It's all like 80s synth wave.
Exactly.
You got the same fucking backward cap. You stupid.
Only
dumb.
like all they want is that trad so-called social conservative aesthetic. They're voting for the aesthetic, and they're getting George W. Bush's fucking war party.
Also,
that is still what the Republican Party is.
That is actually one thing, and sorry to interrupt you, but that's one thing I noticed. I've noticed a lot of people have jumped brands. Like, they're like, oh, I don't want to be called a rhino. I have a professor. I'm not going to name him. He is in Pennsylvania. He's a good guy. He's actually a good guy. I went to his house. Like, I'm not going to say he's a bad dude, but I knew he was like, yeah, George Bush is doing good, Iraq. And then I noticed when Trump comes out, he's like, oh, they don't like George Bush. Oh, yeah, America first. Drain the swamp. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you were for George Bush the whole time. You were for George Bush when Obama was here. But all of a sudden, you want to drain the swamp. And to me, I'll name names. Dan Crenshaw, Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell. All those people, to me, rode the Trump wave because they're still in the Bush mindset, but they need to adopt the Trump brand so they can be socially acceptable.
But we have to remember, it's not like this is some battle for the Republican Party the way it's being portrayed. Like, there's the Trump wing, which, is like bad on trade, but maybe, kind of good on war. And then there's the Bush wing, and the Trump wing might not be good, but right, if they win, that's better. That's how some libertarians think of it. And the fundamental flaw of that is that we saw the Donald Trump administration. Mm-hmm. It was a fucking disaster. Like,
do you have any thoughts on him saying wrong? Huh?
We bombed Syria. He escalated in Yemen. And the critical thing that I cannot believe these people forget is 2020. Like, are we just going to ignore the fact that the entire Republican Party, with pretty much the sole exception of Thomas Massie, who was almost expelled from the damn thing, went along with the biggest government program in the entire history of humanity, and one of the most egregious violations of people's liberty, probably the most egregious violation of people's liberty in our lifetime? The whole Republican Party was just on board with that, and we're just going to give them a pass and keep voting for them? This is insanity.
Oh, and you also forgot.
So is voting for the Libertarian Party after their repeated failures. But go ahead. Sorry.
I'm
not sorry, but
no.
I'm trying to ask Harrison questions.
Go ahead.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
One is, I like to watch Anomaly. I think he's a good guy. Like, I do. Okay. I'll say this.
Yeah.
Conservative politicians, not so much, but there are a lot of podcasts and stuff I look at. People who I guess you would consider on the right. One of them happens to be I like DC Drano, I like Anomaly, I like Stu Peters, and I like Greg Reese on Band Video. Sometimes Owen Schroyer is okay, but the only one of
those I really know is Anomaly.
Yeah, Anomaly was joking about how, like, even, Trump called, like, Ron DeSanctimonious and stuff like that. So I was kind of interested, like, hey, do you have any thoughts on that? And B, I agree, just to add stuff he did. He gave Zelensky weapons. He got Russia out of nuclear treaty. So even when people are like, oh, it would have been different.
No, like, Trump made this Ukraine situation so much worse. That was
don't get that. They're just like, oh, he would have scared Putin. I'm like, well, what?
Also, like, the ultimate truth is that this war is wanted by all of the swamp, and Trump is a member of the swamp. Anybody who doesn't think he's a member of the swamp after he fucking, like, had all those pictures with and praise for Epstein, is dumb and a fucking moron, and you can dismiss them. Or they're evil and they're enabling the swamp.
Yeah, I strongly agree. All the worst people in the world, all the worst people in the world, and Donald Trump is part of that group. They wanted this war. Like, why would they do anything to stop it? It was their whole idea. Like, the whole point of this war was that this was the blowback that would then justify a massive expansion of American militarism. For they will, if this war ended tomorrow, they will be fear-mongering about Russia because of it for the next 2 decades. It's like,
I'm a MAGA Republican. Sorry, I've met some disabled people before too.
Yeah, that's another thing. The use of the term America First. Do you guys know how the Trump people started using America First? Scott Horton went off about this again last night, and I just think it's an interesting story. Do you guys know how he started doing this?
He said in a speech, we need to put this, or we need to put America first.
Yeah, but so he actually got that line from an interview like a week earlier. Trump sat down for an interview with the New York Times, and this fucking New York Times journalist, who is probably an Israeli spy,
come on, man.
I'm not even joking. I'm not like dead ass. I'm not.
I want to ask you about Yee now, but I'm
not even like super. Yeah, I don't like Kanye, and I think he's kind of a dumbass. But like,
me too.
No, I'm like, when I say this guy's kind of an Israeli spy, like, I'm not memeing at all.
He means like, Mossad.
Like, yeah, no, like he might actually be a Mossad plant in the American media, because he is a consistent like aggravator for like Middle Eastern wars. This is what the guy does. And he fucking asks, so do you guys know about the America First Committee?
No.
Yes, but go ahead.
So it was a committee in progressive era America that was opposed to World War II. And it was composed of a bunch of people on the old right, so like Mencken and such, a bunch of like leftists and liberals who didn't like FDR and wanted us out of the war. And also the most famous member was aviation hero Charles Lindbergh, who, a lot of people don't know this, one of the reasons he opposed us joining World War II was he was a pretty massive anti-Semite. And so the whole thing has been like smeared by the history books as this anti-Semitic thing, where basically if you love the America First Committee, you loved Hitler. And that's not really entirely accurate. But so this New York Times reporter, he asks Trump, so would you describe your foreign policy as America First? And Trump, of course, because he's a big dumbass and has like never read a book, he's like, yeah, totally. That sounds great. Right. And this New York Times reporter thinks he's got him, because he's like, now I can tie you to this terrible anti-Semitic thing. And of course, the average Trump voter has also never read a book and doesn't care. So now that's why they call themselves America First. But obviously, right, this is where we get to sort of where I was going with it. It's a total fucking joke. Like America First, how exactly? Like, these are still the same people.
More like Saudi Arabia first, am I right, gamers?
Yeah,
they even left. They're like, thanks for all the help. We're gonna work with China now.
Sure, they may not like the right may be better about like not wanting war with Russia right now, but these are still the same people who think that China is literally planning to invade the United States. And literally believe that Iran is building a nuclear bomb because Israel told them for the 20 millionth time, and it's still not happening. But the Israelis said, like,
are you saying Bibi Netanyahu would lie? I just don't believe that.
Also, of course,
these are useless people, and supporting them is a fucking dumb idea.
Also, of course, like if that was the case, if being this proximal or this connected is evidence of a Chinese invasion or Iranian nukes, then maybe the US having bases fuck everywhere is like evidence that they've been doing it already and they're the problem. What? Yeah. NATO countries are the actual aggressor and all of these fucking things are just Nah, couldn't be. Fucking has to be that Oh no, China. China is a terrible threat. We've got to stop China, even though the U.S. is doing exactly what China did, and even though the U.S. is like it has been propping up regimes exactly like Iran forever. Iran, they have morality police. They killed women and gay people and etc. But Saudi Arabia did the same thing, and they're perpetuating a genocide, and you can fund them if you want, right?
Biden just called. I'm sure you both saw it. Biden called last week for regime change in Iran. He said, we will free Iran.
Yep.
A, that's fucking insane. B, no one on earth doesn't see that America as a collective entity is just one big giant hypocrite. We will support the most evil regime.
I don't think
it benefits us.
I honestly don't think Dan Crenshaw believes that. I honestly think Dan Crenshaw believes he's doing the right thing.
Dan Crenshaw has a probe for the aliens in his eye socket, and it's a satellite dish that beams it directly into his dumb fucking skull.
Yeah, no, I honestly believe like neocons.
And no, I don't actually believe that, but it'd be funny if it was true, especially since like his eye patch thing that's connected to this thing that's stuck in his eye. It's sort of like it looks like an anal plug if you look at it right.
I think a lot of neocons really do believe, and I would also say I think there's a fair number of neocons who secretly, like deep down in their deepest heart of hearts, understand that like the Saudis are like the great thorn in their side, and they don't have a good excuse for it. And at the end of the day, after they invaded everyone else, they would then also invade Saudi Arabia.
Well, of course, and then and they would have propped up another paper tiger in the form of like the Saudi government because
totally
they're rich off the petrodollar. The House of Saud is the richest royal family on the planet, and they did the same thing with Operation Cyclone. They funded the original Mujahideen, which would become Al Qaeda, Al Nusra, ISIL, ISIS, and the Taliban.
Kareem has a point,
Jeremy. I don't believe that that fact. I don't believe is true.
Which one?
Oh, the Rothschilds are definitely richer than Al Saud. You don't think so?
The Rothschilds aren't a royal family.
They are.
No.
No. What? Stop.
There is no Rothschild kingdom. You're fucking wrong.
There's an empire.
That doesn't mean it's
not
a kingdom.
The same thing.
All right.
They're a family. Not all families are fucking kings. or princes or whatever.
Okay, they're global enslavement people.
But yeah, no, I do think that
they're evil.
I do think that the neocons believe it. Like they are true believers. I will say the rest of like the American empire that surrounds them, I don't think is.
I don't think either, but I think if you sat down Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo, they're just
absolutely.
No, they're running off the script. Oh, we had to invade. We saved lives. We have to invade. Like
they believe it. I think that.
I think they've convinced themselves. Like, all right, imperialism helps people. Okay, let me wait.
They believe fundamentally in Charles Krauthammer's idea that started the whole neoconservative thing of the unipolar moment, that this is the special time when America just naturally rules the world, and we have to seize this opportunity to make the world the way we want it to be. And they just don't understand. They're trying to extend that unipolar moment, I think is what's going on. They're just trying to get more time because they don't understand that the unipolar moment is over. They totally blew their chance. The chance for America to shape the world in our image, that was the turn of the century, and we completely blew it. The empire is dying. We deserve it. And the lesson should be that one powerful, benevolent empire shaping the world in their image isn't possible. That's an insane
thing. As Rammstein, the great philosophers Rammstein put it, we're all living in America.
Oh yeah, I love that.
America is wunderbar. So the thing that I would say is that you should like look instead of at the turn of the century at what happened a little bit afterward, because they got done giving a bunch of money, arms, and training to a bunch of mujahideen who would later go on to form the basis for Al-Qaeda. And Bin Laden or Tim Osman's camp in Khost, and a bunch of fucking bombings suddenly happened in and around that area. And they all said, hey, that must be Bin Laden. He took credit for all these bombings, according to us in our intelligence reports. And then after that, they had a very convenient target to blame with totally unscorched passports, which should have been the plane's shielding material because they survived. The passports that would lead them to say that, hey, this was immediately bin Laden. So circulate this on all press outlets in very much the same way that this is very dangerous to our democracy mantra circulated. And all of that started to form the basis for the New World Order. And also, just before that, like months before that, the U.S. government gave $53 million to the Taliban so that they could criminalize opium. And what did they do? They didn't criminalize. They did criminalize it, but they didn't stop selling it. And they had a bunch of confiscated opium that they started to mass export and sell at a premium. And all of that generally meant that the Taliban government had a great foundation, a great amount of funding to start off. And so the U.S. government not only created the basis for the Taliban with all the splinter groups that funded them, but they also created the basis for the Taliban government under the 9/11 post 9/11 regime. So they created their enemies in the Middle East, and they used the wars in the Middle East, the global war on terror, and the global war on drugs as an excuse to create the foundation for their world empire, their hegemony, and their petrodollar and control. And all of that allowed them to establish the general vibe that they would control finance, which is why everybody is getting on board with CBDC now, which will be the head of the U.S. hegemony, because everybody will suddenly be on board with international payments on a CBDC structure, and everybody will be controlled by this new financial world order, at which America is at the head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Kareem.
One thing that I found, or not, I don't have a better word for it, but check the fact on it, is that from what I heard, the Taliban, because they have, if you want to call it ancient Islamic or radical Islamic or, just Wahhabi kind of views, definitely doing any type of opium is haram. So what I heard is they started torching the opium fields. And then because of that,
of their competitors, they did that to make it seem like they were using U.S. government money well, so that they could keep getting it. $53 million fucking dollars. You can go to agoristnexus.com/Taliban to find my article on how the U.S. government made the Taliban. It was immediately after I wrote an article called "Will They? Won't They? They Won't. Afghanistan is too profitable to leave." And when I said that they weren't going to leave and that they were still going to conduct operations in the area, and that there were still going to be boots on the ground, partially PMC, I was called insane. But you'll see, if you look at military fucking newspapers for ever afterward, that the PMC were definitely on the ground, that they were conducting operations for intelligence and also a bunch of other U.S. government thuggery, and that they would eventually lead to the assassination of Al-Qaeda generals, which, contrary to Trump's blustering, he did not eliminate Al-Qaeda, and contrary to Biden's blustering, he did not do it either. And with Biden now as president, they've gone into Afghanistan multiple times to depose certain people and take care of certain business, and celebrated every time after saying that they were out and permanently out, which means that they're not out or permanently out, and they've still been doing this whole time. And I was right.
Where was it in the world a couple months ago that they claimed they drone struck one of the 9/11 masterminds?
Bakr al-Baghdadi, is that who we're talking about?
Yeah. The guy they the guy they also had claimed they had already killed like 3
Yeah, they
years
killed him
earlier,
100
and
times
then
now.
all those news articles got scrubbed because they totally killed him this time.
Pretty sure he's a CIA agent, but whatever.
Yeah, that was a bit odd. But wasn't that in Afghanistan? Like they
I don't
there's
know.
no
I
no
don't believe anything they say, whether it's deep state dawn.
yeah,
or
but
Darth
the fact that they would even say with in one breath, like we've left Afghanistan, and also we just conducted this drone strike in Afghanistan.
Yes,
like,
and it was right fucking after, and it was in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
yes,
they're basically not even really pretending. And anyone who thought the PMCs were leaving anywhere is a moron.
Ultimately,
that
I've been right every step of the way.
Contractors.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I've been right every step of the way, and people called me insane, et cetera, because they couldn't argue with me.
That's so like.
Well, one of the things,
so like standard playbook to say like,
we're
pulling out the whole military and leave the PMCs.
To touch on what you said, Jeremy, which you're sort of correct, but sort of incorrect in a certain way. So obviously, the United States federal government and a large majority of citizens and businesses lost millions of dollars, right? The economy was gutted from the war. So in that sense, we didn't really make money. We actually lost trillions of dollars. But those minority of I'm talking about the general broader United States, but the minority
they
of
can
those
get
people,
fucked.
The minority
that's
of
what
those
the elites
people,
think.
I know, that's what I'm trying to say. The minority of those people who are in elite circles and work for, let's say, weapons manufacturing and different corporate groups that were in the war that profited. Yes, they did profit from the war, but the larger majority of the people of the middle class was outright
Those people
gutted.
didn't need to.
Okay, hold on.
But more people lost money than made money. But the point is, it's the elites.
The people who matter made money. Go ahead.
I wouldn't say that they. What do you mean by that?
I put air quotes, yo. I'm being fucking sarcastic.
Yeah.
Can you
No, I thought you were.
Yeah, you're being mean.
Can I ask Jeremy a question? Because I think it kind of gets to the point Daniel's sort of trying to make.
All right.
So, Jeremy, do you think that from the perspective of the elites, the wars were a mistake that didn't work out?
No.
Or do you think it worked out exactly according to plan?
So here's the deal. I come from the desert, and the desert that I come from is very much used for military testing. Right. And the reason they use that desert for military testing is it's a very similar biome to the desert in Afghanistan, Pakistan, that sort of thing. I already know what it's like to live in Afghanistan / Pakistan, etc., in the desert regions, obviously. And now I know what it's like to live in some place like Ukraine, because I'm on a relatively similar latitudinal line. As somebody who served, I don't like calling it that because I'm an asshole, but as somebody who's been in the military, for a fact that when they need to test weapons, there's two types of testing. There's testing back at the bases, in domestic test ranges and shit like that. That's where you find out baseline whether or not it's a possibility that they could work. And then no plan survives contact with the enemy, so you have to test it on the field. You've got to get boots on the ground, and you've got to get machines there too. And so you create situations, here's where it gets fun, where you get to test all of these things. And now they've got all this cannon fodder to test all these new toys that they could use to enforce their will domestically. They already tested it in desert environments. They already tested it for a long time over there and made sure that it would work. Made sure that their weapons could see through the sand. Made sure that their weapons could see survive heat conditions. Made sure that their weapons could survive strong winds and not get too much gunk in the gears. And that was great. They did it awesomely. They fucking killed a bunch of people. They murdered a bunch of families, and they made a bunch of money. But then after that, they needed a place to test it that was muckier and colder. So we're now moving on to the northern front. Okay. And that's the reason.
I kind of feel you there. Okay.
And so that's the reason that they do all this, because they did it in Europe for a bit with those weapons, but those weapons are antiquated now. So they needed to test their new weapons in the desert first, and now they're testing them in Ukraine. and finding out all their nice, neat little ways to control people. And it's since essentially they get similar environments on the northern hemisphere that they do on the southern hemisphere. They just can isolate everything to the northern hemisphere, do the desert in there for their desert testing, do Ukraine, etc., for their modern testing of like those sorts of mucky environments, frozen, all that stuff. And then they also get a bunch of people to support the ossification of their power by eliminating the final few countries that aren't on board yet, like Iran and Russia. BRICS in general needs to be handled in order for this sort of thing to happen. And their control, in order to be ossified, needs to be broadened and specified at the same time. And you know that because you've heard commanders speak. So you know I'm speaking with like some sort of words they would use. So
Can I ask you a question? My question is just like, why do you think they want to consistently, over and over again, periodically test these weapons? Like, do you think they want to test them just for the money purposes, or do you think they have plans of being in some sort of broader conflict that they would?
I already said that. Because there's going to be a civil war here. They've been doing sort of like siloing. They've been doing stratification. They've been getting exactly what they wanted with people moving. Balkanization is the term I was looking for. They've been balkanizing the people into the similar camps that they did in the Civil War, so that they can get another civil war, and so that they can eliminate dissidents and like sort of align everybody into the Great Reset.
And you mean like bombs and that type of weapons that they planning on using as well? That just seems a little counterproductive.
Of course it does, from the perspective of people who think that like
exactly.
but not from the perspective of the people who have been gradually convincing everybody that there's a dangerous right-wing insurrectionary force because of a tantrum on January 6th.
Okay, but Jeremiah, so here's my issue with that. I feel like if this starts right with the war on terror or earlier, right? At that point, they still have the power and acceptance. They don't need a civil war, right?
They've got power and acceptance with a certain group of people. They don't have power and acceptance with everybody, and so they need to get these stragglers off the board and ossify power.
But if they can solidify their power without a civil war, then that's better. Then that's better than doing it with.
That's always my question.
But that's if people like us don't say no. If people like us do say no, then they've got a civil war.
Well, I don't know about that. I'd say more of a revolutionary war than a civil war, because
it's their actions with the wars that drove that negative conclusion. And that's why I think, like, to some extent, this can't have all gone according to plan, right? Like,
it's their actions with their wars that drove a significant amount of the negative sentiment prior to the Civil War too. Like the Whiskey Rebellion was partly because people didn't like the new formed government.
That's actually a good point. God damn it. Okay.
See, but this is what I do. I blackpill everybody.
Right.
Huh?
Okay.
What?
So now I do have a question, since we're talking about Ukraine. Harrison's in the institution here, so I'm curious. I know I don't believe the official story. They say there's contractors or inspectors in Ukraine now.
Yeah.
Like actual boots on the ground.
Yeah, I was asking Harrison about that in the chat.
I'm curious.
Oh, wait, what? I didn't see it.
Yeah, this was a while ago. I think I was asking you. I was asking you
and I saw
about,
Danny was asking.
About these boots on the ground in Ukraine.
That is absolutely CIA Special Activities Division. That's
really.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's not military.
So they're not weapons inspectors.
Oh no, that's the CIA.
Are they military or intelligence?
I don't think. So military deployments. This is just a thing I happen to know. Military deployments are much easier to track through like open source intelligence. There's the U.S. military actually doesn't have super great OPSEC, and if they deployed so basically there are two forces that would do the job in Ukraine that these people are supposedly doing. That would be the CIA Special Activities Division or Green Berets. That's who we implant when we implant like advisors with other countries. And it would be much easier for cyber sleuths to figure out if Green Berets were there than to figure out if the CIA was there. So my money's pretty hard on, it's CIA Special Activities Division.
So what do you think they're doing there? Do you think they're just investigating and gathering intelligence, or what do you think the broader reason
they
is
are
for them being there?
These are probably, I would say, military experts with better experience and training than the average Ukrainian, or probably any Ukrainian. And so fundamentally what they would be there for is force augmentation. By having them as commanders and advisors within Ukrainian units, they make Ukrainian units more effective.
They can train the militias off the books because of black money.
Yeah. So this is the standard American playbook. This has happened in pretty much every war that has happened on Earth since Vietnam.
And it already happened in 2014 with Ukraine.
Exactly. Pretty much any war on Earth that has happened in the whole world since Vietnam, the CIA has been there training or arming one side. This is the standard American playbook.
Wait, but that would lend me more to, because my understanding is this: the CIA does more like shadowy stuff. A Green Beret.
No, they do plenty out in the public. That's what Incutel is.
There's overt missions,
CIA does a lot of shit.
It wouldn't be Green Berets or Airborne Rangers or anything.
No. So what they do, pretty much the standard deal is that guys who go to that kind of unit, the really good ones who are, not just good door kickers, but like mentally savvy, they kind of graduate to CIA Special Activities Division, which is basically like it's a military special forces team, but it's in the CIA, so it's a little bit blacker.
Yeah, like you're basically just thinking of like DI shit, Kareem. You're thinking DI instead of DO.
Yeah, basically.
And to be fair, I'm not an expert on any of this, so I can kind of skip basic feedback. So
I know just enough about enough things to be an asshole about them. That's my problem.
So Harrison, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
In your opinion, what do you think, starting with these official, like you said, they said weapons inspectors, air quotes, but you think that they're probably some sort of, people from the CIA,
weapons inspectors, weapons inspectors in Ukraine.
That's what they said.
Inspecting whose weapons.
Yeah, exactly.
It
didn't make sense to me either. But that's why I wanted to ask
also,
you. What do you think the broader goal is? Do you think they're going to bring more and more? Do you think it's going to be an Afghanistan proxy 2.0? Do you think they're just going to go that same route?
The model for Ukraine is for it to be 80s Afghanistan.
Really?
The idea is for Russia to pour every resource they have into it until the Putin regime falls. That is their plan.
That makes sense.
That's what Dan Crenshaw essentially said.
Just specifically, they have CIA people over there for multiple reasons, not only for training, augmentation, and all that shit, but because if they have them there, they can verify receipt of weapons and verify proper disbursement rather than having them be like, whoops, we don't know where they went.
Right. They need to know where all that money and weapons went, because it obviously, there's some bad guys over there in Ukraine. If the wrong people get the wrong weapons and then they're used against Americans, that's obviously politically embarrassing.
But here's the question. We sent them all those weapons. So what are they inspecting? We know what those are.
New crates.
If I go a little bit further, there's a goal for one of them to inconveniently have an accident, or a few people that have an accident, and then say, oh my God, look what they did.
It's the same kind of thing as they targeted civilian populations when the US government was targeting civilian populations many, many times, and so were their allies. It's so they targeted our military. We had some boots on the ground and they hit an installation.
So I will say, I do not think the US wants this war to necessarily escalate.
But it's an option.
And it is an option. But I think at this point, they do see that a true escalation to a more intense war is a mistake. They like the intensity of this war, just this kind of slow grind where both sides kind of lose troops. They want to keep that right there right now.
And
of course, go.
I was going to say, yes, I agree with you. Most of the at least semi-sane people we have left in our political system or some of our elites.
Semi-sane, I like that.
Yeah. In our political system are like, okay, listen, we can have these proxy wars, but nuclear war is like a no-go, right? You're even seeing neocons condemn the escalation and whatnot. But the people who I think really, I'm not going to say they necessarily want nuclear war, but they don't seem, let's say, scared or fearful about it, are these more global elites, WEF people that are acting as though, like, there was an article perfectly representing this. I think it was from the Washington Post or I can't remember.
More like the Washington Post, or sorry, go ahead.
The New York Times. It was like, nuclear war would be actually good for climate change, and there's a lot of these people at the top of the WEF that are saying, like, that don't seem as fearful as a lot of the other people, and I wonder why.
That's a good comment.
Is it because they have bunkers?
Okay, two things. That first of all, the ego in its pwn, that's just made a good comment. They're already making a lot of money off of this right now. They don't necessarily want this situation to shift quickly. In terms of the WEF people having bunkers and not being afraid of it, I think that's two things. For one, I think a lot of the downplaying nuclear war in the corporate press is not necessarily that the elites are just not concerned about nuclear war.
Yeah.
It's that they can't have the people concerned about nuclear war because then the people might stop the gravy train to Ukraine.
Also, it's because they don't need to be concerned about it because they know that the nuclear war is just a way to hype up tensions between the two countries just enough to make the guy that they're after seem insane.
And they've done this. Right. They've done this for 5 decades straight.
Yeah. They are trying to play this brinksmanship where they make it seem like we have to get rid of Putin because he's going to drop a nuke without ever quite getting to the point where he actually does. And
not only is Iran bad, but Iran is sending weapons to Russia now too. And of course, while Iran does that, they're bad to women. We should depose Iran and form a new government there that supports our central banking system.
Of course, the dangerous aspect of this whole thing, right? The dangerous aspect of this whole thing is that they could mess up.
Yes.
Right. When they're playing that brinkmanship, they could make a mistake and the nuke could actually go. I think fundamentally, it's just supreme arrogance.
Yeah.
Yes.
They are convinced that they are really, really good at this.
Well, and I think it's a bit of narcissism because they've done it so many times before. It's like, we've gotten away with this.
They absolutely think that they have an unlimited number of tries where they can take it right to the line and never have Armageddon.
So if you were to do from 0% to 100%, what do you think the percentage is that Russia drops some sort of let's say a tactical or some sort of a nuclear weapon? What do you think the chances are, the odds of that?
1 in 10.
Okay.
So not high. I think it's a very unlikely scenario, but too high.
The
Denver
International Airport murals are a fucking blueprint, and they don't mind wiping out huge sections of the earth in order to hide in their bunkers until it's all cleaner.
That's also possible. I don't know.
We know from, let's call it the scary beer flu thing, and obviously Bill Gates, from Thomas Malthus, who's a garbage philosopher, in my opinion. He bases his stuff off of nothing. We know from all of the public health experts, they think the world's overpopulated.
Yeah.
Isn't war, and even if it escalates, something that because even Klaus Schwab was mentored by a guy named Herman Kahn. A lot of people don't know who believe, if everybody has nukes, we'll all be good. And to me, they're people at the WF seem to like thermonuclear war.
Yeah, there definitely could be some of that watermelon sort of ideology to it, where it's all this, sort of far left green ideology, and they do want some depopulation. There are some of those people, and they're a serious concern and threat to the existence of all humans.
But just to be clear though, it wouldn't be red on the inside, and the green isn't leftist because they're using it to profit massively. Every part of the green industry is a capitalist scam. I had to say that because I know I'm talking to ANCAPs.
I guess that's
Wait,
fair. Like they
Go
are
ahead
obviously-
though. Go ahead though.
I will say that doesn't make them terribly different from any other socialist regime. The fact
Right.
that they profit from it, but also
but like that's why Emma Goldman says there is no communism in Russia before she fled it, and she
right.
wrote this
Yeah,
great
yeah,
article
yeah.
about it.
Yeah, that's legit. But
Okay, fair
so
enough.
towards Danny's point about like a tactical nuke in Ukraine, something else.
Dirty
So
bomb.
I said 1 in 10, right? And that seems low, but something to remember is that like ever since the Cold War, have any of you ever read Tom Clancy books?
I've read a few
Yes,
and
and
played
also,
a few of their games.
and also Splinter Cell is one of the best game franchises.
Yeah, that game
in the
was
world.
awesome. Splinter Cell
Okay, so-
Conviction. Come on, that game was classic.
I'm sure like Clancy, Clancy loved the MIC, and I'm sure we all disagree with him about plenty, but like
actually he
there's something-
didn't, and I just have to say that
Okay.
he hated it, but he thought it was necessary. He was
Yeah,
critical
that's
of it at every single point.
There's
Like everything
something-
about his book is these people are fucked, and I'm going to write about it.
Well, one of his best criticisms of it that he got super right was in Red Storm Rising. And it was there's been this idea amongst like the Western elites since, long ago in the Cold War that if someone fucks up on the battlefield and the balance of power tips too much, one side might use a tactical nuke, but there's a stop button there. And that once someone uses that one tactical nuke, everyone kind of backs off and says, whoa, okay, we're not going to blow up the whole world. And that kind of ends the conflict and everything goes on pause.
Which is why a bunch of people jack off about the Japan nukings, because they say, hey, that saved so many lives.
Yeah.
The war would have continued if we didn't.
And Clancy's
And
criticism...
by the way, just gonna say, I hate it when people say we. It's not we. Fuck you. Shut the fuck up. You you sat on your couch hawking it up. Like Kevin Castley, the neocon hawk. That guy can go eat like a horse dick, like Vouch does.
Fuck chicken hawks.
And like he's this Canadian sitting in his fucking parents' basement with his stupid like non-fitting suit on, screaming about how we need to be hawks. Like fuck you, you piece of shit. Superpower broadcasting.
So Clancy's criticism, which still I think holds true today, and it's very important to keep in mind, is that this idea that one nuke can go and then everyone freaks out and we kind of stop and that's the end of the war, that is insane and will not happen. So when I say there's a 1 in 10 chance Russia blows up, like Russia drops one tactical nuke, okay, but if that happens, there is then a 100% chance that we respond by blowing up the entire world.
Retaliation.
If one nuke goes, there will be retaliation, and all the nukes go.
Hey guys,
that 1 in 10 chance is a 1 in 10 chance for one tactical nuke, but it's also a 1 in 10 chance for Armageddon.
Hey, you know how they start Christmas earlier every year? How about a nuclear winter? Christmas all year.
Jeremiah
to ask you a further question to go down.
And
the line,
you need I think Jeremiah's lost it. He needs some friendly warlords to help guide him in the
Jesus
right
Christ.
way. Competing ones, though.
I just drank this entire container of homemade bone broth, so my brain is supercharged right now. I'm on Alex Jones mode.
Yeah, I can see that. Although I like bone broth, I actually Kellen Fire is a good one. But here's my
question. You got to start making your own. Do you throw out bones?
No, sometimes I use them.
Imagine.
Okay, so what you do every single time you get bones, you put them in a big bag in your freezer, and then you use that big bag in your freezer. You like take a big chunk out of it that will have frozen together, and you throw it in a pot with some like apple cider vinegar and some salt, and you boil that down over the course of like 24 to 48 hours, and you get like really thick, like minerals, fats, proteins, like everything you need really. Cause like what your bones have in them is what's necessary to live. It's why people get marrow transplants. So like, if you can get them to the point where I do, where I can like literally crunch the bones, you're great.
Nice. Yeah. Hey, Earth Nerd Anarchist. Here's my question though. You said that, like Danny said, the WF people are pro that. It seems to me,
more like pro labs. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it seems to me, aside from the LP, I know I'm defending them, and we can discuss if it. Aside from the LP, most state governments, and I'll give you an example, and all of Washington is controlled by the WEF. The think tanks
I
write
wouldn't say
something.
all of it, but most of it. And
95%.
Yeah, that's a fair number.
I think
think influenced is probably a better word
Yeah,
than
that's
controlled,
true.
because
Yeah.
not all of these people, like, it's not all one central institution. They don't all realize how it all works. They don't all play the game. They don't all realize where this is all coming from.
Well, or they're just all
Exactly.
playing their role, because the Bilderberg Group is a collection of these. It includes the WEF, it includes the CFR, it includes the Trilateral Commission, it includes the IMF and WTO. Like, all these people are like relevant to the thing.
I agree,
And it's
but I think
like, that's why I say the Bilderberg Group, because it's a better header than the WEF specifically.
I agree, but I think that the average Washington insider doesn't see the whole picture in that way.
Yeah, not even
So
close.
they're not as much controlled as they are.
I mean, I don't see
influenced
the
in a
whole
soft
picture.
way.
I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I do. I'm just, I know that the Bilderberg Group is a general banner for the people who are puppeteering all this. It's why when people say Peter Thiel is a libertarian, I want to redacted them.
Yeah, fuck that shit. But obviously we got like autistic and stopped whoever was making a point. So
Kareem.
Okay, fine. Maybe they're influenced, but it's just crazy to influenced, I think, to an extent, though, that's almost kind of like looking for exact guidance. Like, I'm influenced by Ron Paul, right? But if Ron Paul tomorrow came out and said cryptocurrency is bad, I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. So to me,
well, if Ron Paul comes out tomorrow, then Slay Queen. You can do it.
I mean, yeah,
that'd be fucking wild.
He's just suddenly a leader in the LGBT community. He sneaks in.
Can you imagine the absolute pandemonium that would be Liberty Twitter?
Ooh woo. He comes out. He comes out as a trans furry. He's got a fursuit.
Dude,
whatever.
Dude, Tho Bishop would actually cry. It would be such a funny day.
I mean, that would be funny. But
by the way, I meant to tell you guys, if you haven't already, check out Ron Paul's interview with Tulsi Gabbard. It was actually really good. They had a little conversation together. It's pretty nice. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely will do that. But okay, I'll give you a direct example.
Right.
A think tank article comes out. I don't know who wrote it. Said we want to ban private car ownership. Right. Then Newsom in California does it. He writes a bill. So, like, what level of influence? It almost seems like he's like, "Hi, think tank." Oh,
okay. So,
see, that's the problem.
That's just how legislation works. Is because Newsom didn't write that bill.
Mm-hmm.
The think tanks are the ones who write all the bills.
Yeah, and he's got his slicked back hair and his dumb fucking grin. He's just over there to be like, "Hey, I'm Gavin Newsom."
Yeah, they just sign the bills. So
fucking khakis.
So they are controlled by the WEF.
Well, so the way I would explain it is sort of just like, any complex human biological system, right? Like a society, and you can go to like America or Europe and smaller, tribal societies. Somalia is a good one we talk about a lot.
By the way,
right there. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. 7 p.m. my time, so in like about 30 minutes is my heart out. Just so you know.
You're gonna get hard. Oh, we got that on stream.
Well, for Ron Paul,
why
remember,
he's gonna look up the
we know it's for Ron
from
Paul.
pre and post Somalia.
Yeah, well, Harrison just thought of Ron Paul coming out.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, I got to get in on that.
All right, but anyways, to continue what I was saying. So essentially, like, obviously we all agree here that there are hierarchies, and that within these hierarchies, obviously they're vast, they're different, they're not all the same, but there's, hierarchies pointing up, pointing down, and there's people at the top of these hierarchies, a socioeconomic hierarchy.
And pointing left and right.
You could say a Bezos and Musk is at the top of the socioeconomic hierarchy as far as status goes, as far as wealth, as far as acquisition of resources and whatnot, as well as Klaus Schwab and all these other guys. And then there's people below them. There's still rich people, right? Millionaires, but not quite there. And you go all the way down to the poorest of the poorest who may not even have houses, right? And the way that whole system works is complicated because the people at the bottom do a large portion of the manual labor, right? They do a lot of the working, they do a lot of the making of the resources. Now, the people at towards the higher part do a lot of the sort of acquiring resources and making businesses to sort of produce and distribute those resources, amongst the masses. So those people who also make the resources get the benefits of the resources themselves.
Some of them, most
not
of
all
them
of them.
don't.
I know that, but the point is, in DC, it's sort of like that. It's a complex sort of trickle down system where at the top you have people who really aren't even in DC, who are sort of global operators that
like
operate.
Davos.
Yeah, like Davos, like the WEF, like all these different. The Bilderberg Group is
Dubai.
is a good sort of broad, sort of analysis of it. But they make policy
Stockholm.
at the top, and they've been making policy since the 60s and 70s. This whole environmentalism as it stands today, was really first started in Limits to Growth book, right? In the late 70s, right? And that sort of turned into what it is today. And those people just wrote books, they wrote white papers, and then a lot of the elites underneath them who were coming up saw these work and was like, oh, that's the good work. Most of them probably did believe it. We're like, oh, this is what we need to do. This is the limits to growth. If we don't have, if we have this many amount of people, we're going to have this many resource problems, and we're going to have devastation, Armageddon, viruses, plagues. And they really believe this. So then that sort of transfers itself from the elite circles, in these political global organizations to academia. And then in academia, it really transfers from those professors from the 70s and 80s. And if you want to go to like Marxism, you go to the 60s and 70s. But with this sort of environmentalism cult thing we're looking at, really the professors started teaching people in the 70s and 80s. And then those people's millennial types, they became professors, and it sort of trickles down. But a large majority of the people at the bottom who are sort of upending and supporting the system, they don't even have any idea about the actual foundations of the system or where the system really originally started. They're just hearing these things about environmentalism and carbon and all these things that they probably believe.
Subscribe to Truth Stream Media. Go ahead.
And these
not sorry, but
these sort of lies and these say conspiracies and these edicts and these agendas, Agenda 2030, all these different things are sort of like trickling down, where a lot of the people within the system don't even know exactly where the ideas came from. They trickle down left and right, and by the time you get it, you get a very complex, really tricky, complicated system of people at the top who do believe it, but also at the same time want to profit off of that sort of idea that they may maybe not believe all the time. So then the people under them see that these people with a large amount of resources and power and wealth are saying this, therefore it's probably true, because we take what people who have high statuses, we take what they say
because of the indoctrination system telling you to find credible sources.
And in academia, and then academia bolsters that whole system up of basically, oh, there's this process, right? In the way that you get approved as a truth, let's say a fact checker or a teacher or a verifier or an expert is going through this academia process. Therefore, the experts who are teaching me these doctrines, which originally came from, Limits to Growth, and even back before that, Julian Huxley, and we can trace this all the way back to the Eugenics Society, which is where a lot of this depopulation stuff really traces back, which in the 60s, basically Julian Huxley transferred the Eugenics Society into the Transhumanism Society, and that's essentially what it did. It didn't go away. It just transferred
Huxley and Elon Musk's grandfather are both technocratic transhumanists, so you should really avoid Elon Musk.
Related in a lot of ways, and I agree with you. The point is, most of the people who are bolstering up the system aren't even aware, of where the ideas that they're stating to be, say, morally superior or intellectually savvy came from. They don't know where they came from. And
because they're trusting the science instead of verifying the science.
But why do they trust the science in the first place? Because they've gone through that indoctrination center to say, trust the experts. This information has to be information because it came from an expert. What is an expert? Someone who went through this rigorous academic process, which is essentially a cycling thing where these experts and this quote unquote knowledge and these edicts and these agendas go through generationally until you get to where we are now, where all the stuff a lot of people were warning about in the 80s and 90s has passed through academia generation after generation, and we're living the doctrines. We're living the white papers of the 80s. That's what I like to say. We're living the white papers.
And now you hear all these people writing these articles because their pay comes from people who legitimize that. They're writing these articles that say things like, well, this isn't so bad. That's what this is. It's not so bad. You know how much more nutritious cricket or cockroach milk is to cow milk.
Yeah, and that's because they're listening. That's because they're probably listening to some experts who are saying, look how nutrition it is. But they have no idea the broader plan of global elites to go with something to go through with this plan that they literally called the Great Reset Initiative, that Klaus Schwab literally started along with the prince, who is now the king And they set this up. It's a part of the World Economic Forum. He even wrote a book about it, and they talk about this openly. And it has its base, when you look at it on the surface, in environmentalism and saving the planet, protecting the planet, and resetting capitalism.
That they still call it. I love that they still call it a conspiracy theory when that's what he called his book, and you can still
it
just
is a
buy
conspiracy.
Yeah, I love that.
It's not a
They're
theory. It's definitely a
interviewing?
conspiracy, but
He's
not
like,
a theory.
It is a theory. Here's the thing. Here's the fun thing.
Yeah.
Here's the
their
fun
theory.
thing. The gravity is a theory.
Right.
But if I drop my fucking Afro pick here, it's going to fall.
Yes, technically,
because
you're right.
So when people say that you're wrong because
very autistic, you're all very autistic, but
no,
also
but here's,
correct. It is a conspiracy
Here
theory.
is the fun part about that is that when you do say that, when you call somebody a conspiracy theorist, you're complimenting them. Because yes, I have formed a scientific basis for my understanding of this conspiracy, and fuck you for implying otherwise, you bitch.
The scientific definition is that a theory is a hypothesis supported by the evidence.
Yes.
And some theories have more evidence than others. Some theories are based more on empirical evidence. Some are a little loosely based on things that aren't as, empirical. But I want to ask you guys a question. I want to see if you agree with me and what your thoughts are on this. So I've been thinking about it recently. I've been thinking about it recently. Like, if there was one sort of, let's just say, aspect, organization, or structure that we should attack, go after, that would solve, like, which structure would do the most help or
CBDC
decrease
It's all
the
about,
most amount of harm. And I
I
was thinking about it.
Yeah,
I get it. CBDC is important, but where do those ideas really prosper and come from? I think that the best way to stop this cycle of elitist propagandizing, double speak sort of propaganda in these systems is to really remove the credibility of academia, make academia what it should be, right? A school, you can go to a school, it's a voluntary thing, but schools aren't a necessity, don't necessarily, promote truth, right? It's not like a school is automatically truthful because they're a school.
In a practical sense, I think, Danny, like, you're maybe onto something, that like attacking the school system, attacking the corporate press, like that's how we make progress.
Which I've been doing for like 6 or 7 years.
Think about it. If we did that, CBDC, if everyone had information about what it did and about what these centralized digital currencies have actually done in China, do you think people with that evidence and that information would be like, oh, let's do that? So it's only,
To go to your original question and sort of where Jeremiah was going with it, that they are like those systems, the public schools, the corporate press, that is just a growth off of the main problem. If there was one institution that we could attack, like if I had like the Thanos glove and I could snap away one of them, right, it would be the Fed. Like the central banking apparatus and the entire Western money system.
The only way to take down CBDC is to remove these powers who have been planning this for decades. Exactly. So that was what I was saying.
Yeah, that's
basically end the global Fed.
That's what Jeremiah was saying, and that's what we would do if we could just snap away one institution.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Given that we can't, maybe like focusing on like the propaganda arm is a better way to build up to that. But if we could only get rid of one, that's the one.
Yes.
Okay. And I see what you're saying.
I guess my point would be this: you don't have to abolish like hitting different sectors. You have to see who's actually putting out good information, who's not. Jeremiah is going to disagree with me, but like a lot of my thought processes, or at least I would say about 85% of them, do come from the Duncan Black professor at George Mason University. So I don't think all education is bad.
It's not, but I agree with you. The problem is with the education system.
Wait, is he an economist at George
Mason?
Mason?
His name's Dr. Leeson.
So he's an Austrian, right? Because George Mason teaches.
Yeah.
So
yes, he's an Austrian.
Institutions should be necessarily. institutions shouldn't be necessarily revered just for being an academic institution.
Correct.
Institutions should be necessarily revered if they are credible, truthful institutions that promote truth and discovery. And really, I think at the bottom base of it, free speech and free dialogue. At every great university that you look at, whether you want to look at Cambridge, free speech and free dialogue is the basis for a truly prosperous, educational institution.
Yeah, I don't think any libertarian who's saying we need to go after who's saying we need to go after academia is saying who my real enemy is, the economics department at George Mason that are advocating all the things I believe. That's not
maybe not that department, but
that's why when Daniel said academia, I said academia and the corporate press, because I view them as fundamentally very much the same thing, intertwined. They have kind of the same job.
Connected.
Attack the propaganda arm.
Well, here is what I was getting at is think about it like this. What is one of the biggest reasons as to why we have the current financial system and the current Federal Reserve and the way our monetary system operates? It's because of modern monetary policy and other versions of monetary policy that are similar to that are promoted in these universities.
It's partially because of that, certainly, but it's mostly because this is entrenched and has been entrenched for a while. That's part of the reason the U.S. government did the Whiskey Rebellion crushing, because they realized that competing currencies would be a threat to their model, so they still needed to profit off of them.
Yeah, I know that, but what I'm saying is it wasn't even that long ago to when we didn't have a Federal Reserve. I agree with you in the sense that these things happen over such what seems like 100 years is not that long when you look at the broader history of the world, but 100 years now. 110, 115 years when you look at it from generation to generation. The people today don't have any idea, I'm not going to say all, but don't have the very smallest idea of what the country was before the Federal Reserve, what recessions and financial crises looked like before the Federal Reserve, why the Federal Reserve was instituted, and how closely related the Federal Reserve enactment was with World War I. And you could say the collusion or the sort of connection between the monetary system into the war system, into the fundamental military industrial complex.
Just because I'm loosely related, and I have to say this because I'm loosely related, President Haridng was the best libertarian president, because what he did was he was all about no foreign entanglements, reducing regulations, slashing everything. And that's why they didn't like him. That's why they blackballed him, because they were planning a world war.
That's why academia and the corporate press still smear him. It's ridiculous. He's one of the best presidents America ever had.
If you look at FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, they did a whole thing about the depression you never heard of.
Yep. So
the what you never heard of?
The depression.
Oh, depression you never heard of.
There was a depression before the depression, and that depression was stopped and forestalled by the shrinking of the state and the refusal to get involved in foreign entanglements.
If you guys don't mind me asking, how old are you?
No, I hate you. I'm curious. How old do I seem? We'll do this like a quiz.
28.
You're in your mid. Oh my God, you're in your mid-20s.
Anybody else?
He's either 28 or 33. It's one of the two.
Kareem, you got it.
I was just wondering if I was the youngest.
I'm 21. I'm putting that out there. I'm 21.
Okay, so am I.
20. He's 31.
He almost looks like you could be 40, but also 29.
Never mind. I don't fucking care. None of this.
I'm 30.
I was just wondering if this was something you guys learned in school, because it was something I learned in school, but I went to alternative schooling. I did when I was in middle school. Okay, I went to an online charter school. And so we had an American history class, and I learned about the depression you've never heard of. And it was honestly when, even before I was super red pilled, this was the point where I was like, wow, academia is bad and we must destroy them. Is they literally teach America went through this horrible economic time and eventually recovered naturally. But we didn't want to do that anymore. We wanted to not go through those busts. So to fix that problem, we created the Federal Reserve,
which made economic problems way worse.
No attention.
I was taught
pay
too,
no
even
attention
in
to the
non-alternatives.
the fact that we had a way worse depression immediately after that.
Lasted longer. The unemployment was longer.
Yeah, that's
the
the
jobs numbers were
craziest
worse.
thing.
And then
everything about it was
teach
worse.
you, and then they teach you about the Great Depression and don't address at all that the whole point of the Federal Reserve was to stop exactly that, and it failed. It was a disaster.
And then us Haridings have a demonized name.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're a Hariding?
We'll help you.
He's Jeremiah. He's Jeremiah Haridng.
Yeah. I'm loosely related to the guys, so it was like one of those things where like I grew up to hate him, and then I realized that I shouldn't do that because he wasn't bad. I mean, he was a president, so fuck him too. But like on the grounds of presidents, he was the best.
In fairness,
my grandfather was doing stuff in the Egyptian.
If you list every single president, America has an abysmal track record.
I think JFK was pretty good in my opinion.
I think Calvin Coolidge was awesome. Yeah, Calvin Coolidge.
Coolidge was good. Coolidge was good. Yeah, I like JFK though.
I like
exactly what we need to do. Nothing.
I like some of the founding fathers, and I like
Jefferson.
I like some of the Republican liberals, and that's about it.
Do we like Jefferson Davis?
No.
About General Lee? I like General Lee. No, I'm serious.
I'm more sympathetic to Lee than Davis, I guess.
Okay. Here, I got a plan for academia. We'll call them up. We'll say hi. Hi. How you doing? Do you think pirates are anarchists? Okay, you're fired.
I swear to God.
Yeah, they are. They
fucking retards.
They're kind of criminals, but hey, you gotta have fun during the 1800s. There was no Netflix and chill. Yeah, that's right. All right, you can stay. Pirates are anarchists. Thank you.
Well, I think, and one of the things you touched on, not necessarily intentionally, but talking about Haridng, talking about the Depression, we have to bring up, obviously, who was president during the Federal Reserve enactment, which was Woodrow Wilson, who was one, you could arguably say that he was one of the most entrenched academic presidents we've ever had.
And evil.
Largely controlled by, left-wing, communist, socialist, at that time, which was fairly new in America, organizations.
He wasn't, but I'll get to that later.
He wasn't what?
These people weren't authentic communists. They were in the same vein as USSR.
I see what you're saying. And that's one thing I bring up. There was this, I don't know if you guys ever heard of him, but there was this politician who actually ran for office while he was in prison named Eugene Debs. And it was one of the first instances that the federal government used the Espionage Act on, an American citizen. And he's one of the old socialists that I say, right? Let's just take the socialist doctrines from what they are at their base, right? Let's take out any of the sort of, maybe missteps and linguistic errors that, Marx and Engels made. But let's just say the basis.
Fuck those guys. Bakunin was so much better by
let's
miles.
Let's just say the
is
basis.
The most base lefty.
The basis for the Marxist doctrines and the socialist doctrines, if you want to call them that, is that the working class is almost always at war with an expansive upper elitist class, and that the working class needs a voice and needs a platform to make sure it doesn't get left behind into utter chaos and devastation, right? I think we all agree on that. So a lot of the older socialists, and I'm sure they're still out there these days, I'd consider Jimmy Dore in that category as well, but these socialists who really do care about the working class, who really are anti-elitist, who really are against the establishment and are against these, sort of institutions that, really claim they're for the working class, but are essentially siphoning off money from the working class to basically, bolster up their position in the socioeconomic hierarchy or bolster up their position politically. But there are those socialists, Eugene Debs being one of them, that I like. I like those old guys who are like, they really do stand for the working class. They're not just like, oh, I want the working class to flourish. Meanwhile, I'm with my communist elites and I'm making all the money. I don't have to face any of the consequences that the working class have to, face. And this is what Orwell and Aldous Huxley talked about, that, they talked about these, when they were in the Soviet, and Solzhenitsyn as well, whose book I'm reading for the second time. He has a lot of books, but, he saw this, that he would he was in the gulags from 1945 to 1958, right? He got arrested right after World War II, which he served with on the side of the Soviet Union, but because he wrote a letter to a friend in Ukraine saying how Stalin wasn't anywhere near the Marxist that Lenin was, criticizing Stalin, saying he was way too power hungry, saying Stalin was doing damage to the socialist doctrines. They found that letter because all your letters that you sent to anyone ever during 1940, when was the day of the revolution? Like 1915, right after the revolution, from 1915 to 1958, almost all your mail was going to be intercepted by some sort of Soviet, operator. They intercepted his mail. They locked him up in the gulag, even serving, on the side of the Soviet Union during World War II. And he saw communist after communist, socialist after socialist come into these gulags. And even when they were locked up by the people who proclaimed to be the protectors of the working class, who proclaimed to be these, morally superior socialists and communists, even when they threw them in jail, put them under a bunker, right, tortured them, didn't let them shower for weeks, didn't give them food, it was almost impossible for them to let go of the fact that they had been lied to, that it wasn't a working class doctrine, that it was all about control, and that was what the basis of the Soviet Union Communist Party was for a long time, is that, these people who were proclaiming to be for the working class locked up and killed millions of people. And I'm not talking about German Nazis. I'm not talking about all the Western soldiers. We're talking about Russian citizens were locked up and murdered, at the scale of 10 to 15 millions. And they were being murdered by these communist elites. And even when they were put into the cell, even before they were getting executed, it was hard for these communists to admit that they had been fooled. And I think that's what we're seeing now. No one really wants to admit what's going on at the top, because what's going on at the top, I think, is so atrocious, so violent, so duplicitous, that it's hard for one to really grasp the idea that there are people at the top of this socioeconomic hierarchy, or whatever you want to call it, political system, that don't want you alive, that don't want you to have any power, that don't want you to have any wealth.
Just to be specific, this is one of the reasons, because this is supposed to be an anarchist analysis of elections. So I will say this is one of the reasons that I don't.
Topic.
This is one of the reasons that I don't.
Well, I didn't even come in for what the topic was originally. So
yeah, well,
I'm saying the midterms aren't what people think, and a red wave ain't gonna save everybody.
But at the same time, what I'll say is that, this is the reason that I don't support minarchy as a strategy, and I do think we need something more radical than an electoral system, because the tiniest governments always grow into the biggest, and the reason they do that is because, hey, this country, damn it, you commie, this is America, we're free, this is a free country, live free or die, better dead than red, this is America, we have freedom of speech, freedom of guns, freedom to fuck. We're so awesome here. Everything is awesome. And if you don't like it, you can leave. You have no business telling us that we need to be different, that we need to fundamentally change, that this is anything that you fucking dirty pinko, shut the fuck up. And that's what they do all the time. And they do this even when they're Democrats. They say, if you don't like it, leave. Hey, we got democracy. Democracy is on the ballot, you stupid Russian troll bot, fucking Kremlin asset. You suck Trump cock. You do that right there in the bathroom.
No, but
we know you're a secret closeted gay because we're projecting. So we're gonna say all this stuff, and we're gonna do all this because America's awesome, even though it's encroached tyranny up to this point. Every single ratcheting point of tyranny, encouragement, and encroachment has been done under the guise of it being an awesome and free country. So we're going to keep on sticking to that dogmatically.
All right.
We're going to say that it's still awesome here.
Can I just clarify, as the one who debated against Jeremiah in the voting debate, I actually do agree with that. There is no track record of electing people who shrink the government. That's never happened anywhere on earth in any regime. And if you actually think that's going to happen, you're stupid.
Well, listen, the point that you're making that Jeremy's talking about, and this is that he made a good point, especially given the broader topic that we're supposed to be talking about here, is that there's this arrogance and unwillingness on a large portion of the right to admit that the country is tyrannical. Right. But the right doesn't mind admitting, does not mind admitting and saying that the left is tyrannizing and destroying this country, as if to say that the left is the one destroying it, and that, oh, our country's going to be destroyed if you don't vote red. Our country's going to be destroyed if you vote Democrat, as if to say that it's not already destroyed in many ways. And that's the problem with the right, is that they're always criticizing the left for being, let's be honest, maybe too hard on the West a little bit. Maybe they go too far with their, some of the things they say about Western
colonialism. They don't go far enough because they don't want to admit their part in it.
Okay, in some areas. The point is, though, the right's counter to that is, no, this country's good, and it's fundamentally works. It's fundamentally a good country. See Ben Shapiro and a lot of these neocons say this stuff, but it's not quite that. I think the ideas and the basis of this country are good, but we have gone so far off track, and this is not a new thing.
And that's the thing. I'll just say this though. It's not fine at the base. The reason Thomas Paine got the shaft in historical coverage is because he understood the problems and he called them out. I will be the Thomas Paine even if I get blacklisted off every other podcast and most people aren't willing to talk to me to begin with. And even though it's like constant poverty for me because people aren't supporting my Patreon except Kareem.
Yeah.
But ultimately what I will say is that Thomas Paine got the shaft for a reason, and it's because the country was founded by slave owners and slave enablers, and this country was never free. Once wealthy white male landowners could vote, the rest of the people couldn't. The Trail of Tears happened because of Western expansion and manifest destiny.
Yeah.
And all of this happened because it was never a free country. So no, we haven't strayed. We're right where we started.
Well, I think we've gotten way worse.
I agree with everything Jeremiah said.
You don't think we've gotten worse than we were in, say,
I think that we have gotten refined. I think we've gotten refined. I think that there are a lot of people who back then would have had it a lot worse than they do now.
Okay,
and I think ultimately the fact is that it's gotten refined, that there are that it's broadened, that the plantation is now the whole country, that it's the same thing as it was, but everyone now.
Since we're all spurting out about special interests, can I use this as another launch point to go off about paleos and post-libs?
Yeah, fuck them.
Okay, so fuck.
You really hate paleo.
That was bad. I do
hate paleo so much. It's a good diet.
Okay, so Jesus, I blanked it.
I can make a point.
Well, listen, and Jeremy, just to clear that up real quick, I'm not talking about any of the the actual acts. I'm just saying the basis of the freedom to speech, the freedom to be able to speak, the freedom to be able to own a firearm. Those basic ideas, I think they're generally good ideas. Now, we haven't always obeyed them and we haven't always followed them, but I think
the Second Amendment was only considered a universal carry and possess everywhere thing when the thing started to platform that in the 70s and 80s. The NFA started to create the basis for a lot of gun tyranny, and it wasn't all of that to the start. You still didn't have gun ownership or freedom of speech or fourth or fifth or any of that if you were a slave. Mostly women didn't have it either. The Indians certainly didn't.
I know that, but you're confusing the hypocrisy of our country and
or I'm saying that the country isn't the ideas and the country is just as bad at the foundation.
I'm agreeing with you, but the idea of freedom of speech, the idea of
the
having
ideas
a right
are
to
great,
bear arms, but we haven't lived up to those ideas. Yes, but I'm just saying those ideas and doctrines as themselves.
Cool.
Okay, so what I was gonna say is a lot. One of the most popular essays that's been written within our circles was Rothbard's "Do You Hate the State?" Right, and a lot of people like to go off about the left, and especially left libertarians maybe not hating the state enough, and I certainly can sometimes agree, but a lot of this is paired with the reason libertarianism is a right-wing phenomenon right now is because right now it's the right who hates the state. I would make an addendum to Rothbard's essay. First of all, it is not enough to hate the state. Hating the state is necessary, but it's only part of it. You have to also love liberty, and right now the American right does not love liberty, but also hating the current regime is not the same thing as hating the state. And I think this is fundamentally, this gets to Danny's point about how the right is unwilling to realize how far gone everything is. They want to believe in a conservative idea that they can essentially slow down the progressive freight train and save some noble country that's never existed. And that is because they do not hate the state. They hate
and
the
also
left.
because they like jacking off in private groups about how they're awesome and fucking everybody else is a lefty commie who needs to be thrown from a helicopter.
Of course, but they hate the left and they hate the current
and
regime.
a pedophile groomer who wants to mutilate children's genitals if you support trans people or anything that's being associated with them.
Right.
That too.
But yeah, that's not the same thing. That is not the same thing as hating the state. And I think we need to look at even dissident voices against the current regime, especially on the right, and say, hold on, though, do they hate the state?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
do you support Pinochet? Because if you do, you don't hate the state, do you?
The thing on the right is that I see that they're unwilling to do is many of them won't say get rid of the FBI. They'll be, oh, we just need to put in more people. And then when all these guys who go on Temple, and I like Temple and I like your show a lot, but all these guys who go on, most of the guys who are conservative, who I mainly like him just for the conversations he has. I don't agree with everything.
Joe Rogan has much more interesting conversations.
They're both different. Temple's a little more political. Joe Rogan's more like cultural, sort of UFO.
Depends on the episode. Joe Rogan has political people on anyway.
I know he has political people, but Temple mainly does.
Okay, just let Danny make his point.
Yeah, Temple's a hack though.
The point is that I'm saying. The point that I'm saying is. The point is that he has on these guys who are like, we need to, get rid of this current FBI and remove Christopher Wray, by the way, who Trump appointed in the first place, and remove it and replace it with a better, more moral people. And this is what they do with the FBI, the CIA. They always come down to the foundational belief that we need these groups and these organizations and these government departments aren't, fundamentally bad, but they have a lot of corrupt people in them. And you could even say that they have more non-corrupt people, but the corrupt people have all the power at the top. So we need to get rid of the corrupt people at the top and replace them with moral people who care about conservative values. But they're almost always unwilling to admit that the organization / government department is not about the people. It's about the foundation of it that is tyrannical, and it won't work. Get anyone in there.
That's because post-World War II, fundamentally, conservatives are progressives. They believe they can make a better state, and by making a better state, they can make a more moral people. And that's the fundamental progressive. That is the fundamental progressive idea, and it's insane and evil.
It's true.
Or this was always what Republicans were, because they were never fundamentally much different to Democrats, and even the Lincoln Republicans were saying that we should make the world a better place, and we'll end slavery except for the criminals, and then we'll create Jim Crow.
The first true progressive, really the American Caesar, right? The man who made us an empire and to some extent saved the dying republic, was a Republican.
Yep.
Teddy Roosevelt. That's where American progressivism and the American empire comes from, is the republic had effectively died with the Civil War, and it was revived into an empire, and with it we get this two-party system. Actually,
Jefferson.
I want to write a piece. I want to write a
one
piece
thing.
on this. I want to write a piece on the parallels between America and Rome, with Roosevelt versus Caesar as like a centerpiece of that.
Okay, fine.
I've got to say, Harrison, real quick. I got to get you hooked up with Liberty Sentries. I think Kant would definitely accept your work. I'll talk to him about that.
Okay. I will say I don't really have writing samples. I can write, but
you can make your writing samples in Liberty Sentries. Then you can sell out and work for Reason magazine at some point. You can use these as your samples.
For Reason.
That was a joke.
I know. If I ever publish with one of the big organizations, it would be the Libertarian Institute.
Yeah,
I'd love to do that. I just don't know.
I need to start. Yeah, I need to start getting some writing, because I can write, but all of my writing that I've really done before was at my old college for the intelligence program. So it's all shit I do not agree with anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a Substack? That's what you should do. That's what I've been.
I don't.
Sort of
I've thought
writing on.
about it.
You
Yeah,
can do
you
it.
should
My
make it.
only
It's good
issue,
practice.
my only issue with Substack, it is good practice, and I should just start. I do kind of like the biggest thing I'm waiting on with Substack is I kind of want a bigger Twitter. Like if I was the size of Jeremiah on Twitter and people would actually read my Substack, I'd have a Substack.
That's
but
true.
if I have a Substack now, no one will see it.
So let
I'll
me
read
just
it. I'll
also
support you, but here's the thing.
let me
I
just
would
also say
is-
first off, I have like a review email newsletter that
Mhm.
people can also like already subscribe to. But the reason I'm going with review is because like I need to like rent a private mailbox given my current living situation in order to get a Substack. They put your address at the bottom of those and of MailChimp's. So I'm not gonna dox myself as a consequence of using a service. That's not gonna happen.
Right.
Fair enough. My question with all this is because we're throwing different ideas back and forth.
Mhm.
I think the only way, ultimately, whether it's even done politically or it's done through more conventional means, is understanding the Ricardian law of association and how comparative advantage works, and then taking that to an extension of saying, how does that help social cooperation? Which, funny enough, like we're talking about, the environmentalists got their ideas. My ideas essentially are coming from Menger, who influenced Mises, who influenced essentially a bunch of different economists, coming down from the economists of George Mason, who influenced my thought process. And ultimately what I'd say is, regardless of who gets elected or doesn't, we need to figure out how does this community establish specific laws and rules, and how do they work with other communities. And until we can figure that out, there's not a whole lot else that needs to
Also,
Well, all I can
just
say is
just
that the
just as
state
an
does
amusing
not-
note,
Sorry.
Mises would not consider himself an economist, so it's always funny when people say that Mises economics, but like Austrian economics, he would consider himself a Catalactist. But go ahead, Danny.
What I was going to say is that
What does Catalactus mean again? Just
Catalactics
quickly.
is the obverse of economics. It's sort of like economics says that there's one house, one econo is a house. It's just a word for house. One
because if you
household
break
representing the country.
the etymology of economics is the study of the home.
Yeah, etymology of economics is economics. It's like So, but catalactics is sort of like you analyze things as a series of competing interests that are sort of clashing and cooperating with each other at the same time.
That's interesting. That's interesting that Mises thought of it and self-labeled that way, because I have said in the past that like when you understand Austrian economics, it becomes more than just economics, because fundamentally it's not the way most people think of economics, right? Like it's not just the study of like money and trade. It is the study of human action. It's like,
and if you want to find out more about
it is the broad social science.
And if you want to find out more about catalactics, read Human Action by Mises.
Yes.
That's the book I recommend everybody start with from him.
I'd say fundamentally, since Mises, regardless whether what you consider him or not, an economist, Catalactus, or just a great thinker, I think it comes down to how do we establish social cooperation based on
Catalactics.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say before you interrupted me. But essentially, what I was going to say is the state is a disruptor, and you could even say a preventer of social cooperation. Like as long as the state stands as it is and its size, and I mean, I don't think anyone here would disagree with me saying that it's probably going to get bigger. But before it gets smaller, maybe one day it does begin to shrink and maybe dissolve, maybe in a nonviolent, peaceful way. But the state really makes social cooperation very hard because of the way the state incentivizes certain behavior, because of things like the welfare state, because of all these different quote unquote economic policies that the state has that hurts broader society, that they're mingling in with, the broader society's currency. They're, to quote Ron Paul, they're debasing our currency. They're manipulating it. They're printing money out left and right. They're causing inflation. They're spending more money than they have. They're trying to gather, the means, and really, I think the consent and the majority opinion to have these CBDCs, like the more people they can sell in this, the more likely it is for these ideas to actually sell from a legislative level and to actually get into every state government, just as the Federal Reserve System did, just as, a lot of these modern monetary policies did, and all these things that they're doing are making it harder for social cooperation to work and get better. How can things get better if the government just keeps interfering with social interactions and the broader collective psychology, of our society? It's like, how can we cooperate with each other if we're poor, and how can we cooperate with people when there's such a large dividing line, a large gap between the wealthy and the poor, when there's such that large gap? I mean, in any history that I've read, when you have these large gaps and when they get larger and larger, there becomes more resentment from both. The rich hate the poor and the poor hate the rich. It happens in every society we've seen, and it's not getting better. It's getting worse. We're getting more polarizing.
And it will only get worse because there's a productivity gap. Productivity is rising, and
wages
are stagnating.
Exactly. Yep.
And there's more inflation than ever. While that's happening, the greatest single upward transfer of wealth in history, with this, the pandemic, closures of small businesses,
and then
before that, spending, all that. Yeah,
hold on.
And also, of course, Enron, Madoff, all that, and all the wars, and all the the World Trade Center, which was absolutely an inside job. The whole thing is designed to constantly keep the poor hammered down and crippled, so that they don't have the means to meaningfully resist without significant loss to their person. And also, all of that. I don't know if you're subscribed to me on YouTube, Daniel, but I've been going over significantly a lot of that, like how this cashless society is going to be bad for the poor, how the CBDC is already in a ton of countries and it's coming here, how all this is coinciding with the AI facial recognition grid that I've been warning about for years. And all this stuff is happening all at once because they've been planning it for years. They've been planning it essentially for millennia, but in terms of the more recent stuff, they've been planning this stuff, the AI stuff, the facial recognition, the blockchain based ID and money system. They've been planning that for a very short period of time, and people who've been paying attention can see it. But most people aren't willing to, and they get people in this antagonistic mode to alternate thinkers with that indoctrination system, and that indoctrination system tells them, hey, this person is the other. They're a problem for the class. Attack them. And that's the fundamental root of the lack of social cooperation. We need to come on the side of the people who are dividing us, or we're the bad kid. Go ahead. Sorry, Harrison.
Okay, yeah. So with the end of that manifesto, which honestly was great, both you guys did really well. I actually have a real world friend who is sick, and I promised them I'd hang out with them tonight. So this is
not a problem. It's up the sickness.
Genuinely, I think this has been one of our best episodes. So thanks for doing it tonight, guys.
As always, it's been a while. I always enjoy this.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And if you ever need guidance, there's always good warlords out there.
That's right. All right. Okay. See you guys soon.
Which
do well.
I'd be curious to see, Jeremiah, if you agree. Fine. We'll say you got me. Somalia is not anarchy, but I'll have two hot takes on this. You can agree or not, because I know you like Thomas Paine. The warlords who deposed of Muhammad Saeed Barre in 1991 did more for freedom than the founding fathers who signed
except Thomas Paine, because Thomas Paine was encouraged. Yeah.
And they established a better system, because even though it wasn't anarchy per se,
you won't hear me arguing with that. Okay. The founding system of Somalian minarchy was definitely better than the founding system of American minarchy.
Watchman State just gave me a funny thing. What's up, Watchman? But yeah, that would be my argument. And it would be my argument specifically because they did it through ostracism based on their legal code, the Zir, as opposed to Thomas Jefferson, who said, hey, we all revere this document. Yes, you do, but you died. And as Lysander Spooner said, you can't really, get someone to agree to something just by proxy. They actually have to read it and say, okay, I agree to the Constitution.
Well, also, Thomas Jefferson sucked asshole. And one of the key problems with him And one of the key problems with the whole thing was the fact that, like, if you can justify slavery in your own ranks, then you can justify anything in terms of tyranny in any other ranks. And the fact is that the foundation of slavery and the foundation of expansionism and the fact that this country was basically stolen from people who were already here, that all creates the ripe environment for the kinds of tyranny that we see today. And Thomas Jefferson sucked asshole. Thomas Paine was the better Thomas.
I think they were both good in their own respect. I think Thomas Paine had way more integrity and stood on principle on way more occasions than Jefferson did. So
which is why they talk about Thomas Jefferson more. The unprincipled hacks who run the indoctrination system would rather you focus on that, Tommy. So I don't know what you guys are typing, but either way, I'm going to be out in 12 minutes. Then I'll be in a rounded out 2-hour stream. But basically, yeah, that's my thing. I think this country has always sucked, and that it's never been good, and that there is no great to return to. That's why I don't like MAGA Republicans. But I'm more likely to agree with a MAGA Republican than I am a Biden Democrat by a fucking damn sight. So
here's my.
Are you going to be voting at all, or are you not voting?
I'm voting for Sonic the Hedgehog. You can buy Sonic Frontiers coming out in like 4 days.
What? Hey, since you like Sonic Frontiers and you're voting for him, what's that a example of?
I mean, we've already established that I like reputation-based systems. I just don't like Sharia or the Zir. I think that there are better ways to do it.
Yeah, common law is probably better, and that's what I'd opt for. But for me,
and of course, a more Thomas Paine-focused sort of abolitionist system where anything that enslaves anyone is abolished.
Yes, exactly. But I guess what I would say, specifically to what this comes down to is, maybe you don't agree with me on that, but to me, you buying Sonic Frontiers and you saying, I want to engage in this activity over this, is a form of decentralized behavior, yes. And we agree on reputation. So there can be anarchy even in the state.
Decentralization does not mean anarchy. New Hampshire could secede from the Union and it would still be New Hampshire.
Okay, fine. That would be more hard case anarchy because it's more of a state.
There is no case anarchy. It's either no archons or it's not.
I do look as in cases of human praxeological behavior based on decentralized.
I don't, but I definitely think that there are actions that are based more or less in coercion. I could agree to that.
In almost all iterations of Sonic's story is a quasi-primitivist.
Well, you would be surprised because first off, he works with Tails, who builds technology, and he also in the comics eventually Mobotropolis is a city built on nanites with Nicole, the HoloLink. Oh shit! My internet doesn't like me. It just broke up for a second. With Nicole, the HoloLinks. Being the basis for a nanite city, basically like creating an entire city out of thin air with nanite particles. So you would be surprised. There are certain iterations of Sonic where he's closer, but like there are many, like most iterations of Sonic, he's willing to work with technology as long as the technology is serving the common person, which makes him more like Ted Kaczynski and less of a John Zerzan. If you want more of a John Zerzan character, that'd be Styx the Jungle Badger, who's not only anti-government extremist, but also she is against all technology.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to head out. I appreciate talking to you guys. The only last thing I would say to all the people out there considering the topic of this, as far as voting goes in this upcoming midterms, all I can say is if you believe in the political system, if you're not so disenfranchised that you're going to decide to go out and vote on Tuesday or, early voting or whatever, do not only vote based on your principles and do not vote based solely on party lines. Based on principle. I don't care if it's left, right, blue, libertarian, Green Party. I really don't care. But vote for someone based on principles. And don't vote for someone just because they're better than the other guy. Because you can put any freaking Republican candidate up against most leftists these days, politicians I'm talking about. Yeah, they're going to look better, but that doesn't mean they are better. They actually in a lot of ways have even more problems that you're not analyzing and looking at. And like you said, like we all agreed upon, fundamentally, the majority of Republicans do not want to get rid of the state. They just want to improve it. And that's what I'm going to be saying a lot more. They want to improve the state. They want to make it more moral, as if to say that hasn't been tried or said, I mean, millions of times already in every country known to man.
Also, two things. First off, Watchman State, how about you show up next Sunday at around 7 p.m. Eastern, and we can do this, like, you know, where you can actually show up and talk about some of this stuff, because you seem like you do want to, and we could also talk about Sonic since you seem into that as well. But like, then second is, I do care who somebody would vote for. It informs my impression of them. If they would vote for instance, an Azov battalion commander in Ukraine, fuck them. Yeah. But what I would say is that any sort of pragmatic voter out there is a whore. If you vote based on like some sort of party line or what your like intellectual elites in your little circle jerk tell you to, you're a whore. You've been bought, and you'll spread those legs for anyone. And ultimately,
you're a cancerous whore at that, because you're infecting others by doing that.
And so there's that element of it. And then there's also the element of like, if you're going to vote and it's not about representing you, then you are allowing yourself to represent the system, the machine. You're allowing them to grind you down. I mean, I would prefer you didn't vote at all and that you put all this money into like this going into like electoral politics into the common coffer and say like, hey, we'll solve these problems manually. Because like $9.3 billion is going into electoral politics this year. So like generally speaking, so, okay, I guess my internet cut out for a second. So like generally speaking,
all right, guys, I'm gonna head out.
I would say don't vote at all. Then vote your conscience, because otherwise you're a whore. You are muted, Kareem. But also, how does Saturday work, Watchman? Let me know. Kareem's camera and mic are off now. Okay, well, that's my case.
Sorry, it was just my bird's a little excited.
Well, that's my case. You know, I don't vote. I don't support voting. I think that the $9.3 billion that's going to voting this year in the midterms alone, much less presidential candidates, could go to like ameliorating homelessness or feeding the hungry, or, you know, fixing our crumbling infrastructure, and maybe also investing more in public transportation so that it crumbles less. Like there's a laundry list of things that money could go to that would be better than the state. But at the same time, like if you're going to vote your conscience, and I would infinitely rather that you vote any libertarian than all Republicans. Like all these stupid fucking garbage people, like that guy who like, oh, I'm dropping out so that this MAGA Republican can ascend to the throne. Fuck you, you piece of shit. That's my stance.
Yeah, I think you're referencing Mark Victor. I don't have a problem with Mark Victor, but I think he should have still stayed in. Hey, we can try to do something Saturday as well. Just let me know.
Well, I can only do Saturday if that works for you, Watchmen. I can only do Saturday or Sunday. Like I can only really do one of these a week. I gotta pay rent. And also, if you like what I've been saying, feel free to sub to my Patreon. Even $5 a month would be fucking awesome. So
yeah, I sub to his Patreon, and I like the work he's doing. Here's what I will ultimately say. I agree with almost everything you said. We're spending way too much on this. For one, that money could go to allocating, I don't know, repairing different things that have happened.
Or just dealing with half of the homelessness thing. That's $20 billion.
Infrastructure, what happened in Florida, Mississippi's water problem, all of this money could be going to actually helping people.
And like rebuild Florida further inland, because clearly the coast is a bad scene for y'all. I mean, can you notice that? Anyway, go ahead.
Hey, if you want to fight sharks, I'm down with that. But here's the ultimate thing that it really comes down to. Yes, I'm going to definitely be voting for libertarian candidates. I will be working the polls. But I ultimately know that, hey, as a backdrop, if it doesn't work, there's agorist stuff that really can help. There's different ways of circumventing the state, and that's ultimately what we need to do anyway. And
all hands on motherfucking deck.
Yeah, so just because you're like, okay, I voted for so-and-so, even if they're libertarian, that doesn't absolve you of everything. That being said, at least libertarians recognize we need decentralization as opposed to just keeping the current systems there. And it has been shown to me multiple times, even societies that are poor, decentralization does lift them up. And it can work here too. Also, it's fun to scare and mess with the establishment. As a former punk rocker, I still like causing trouble, and I still like giving the establishment the middle finger. I'm going to do that in different ways, using cryptocurrency as one, educating people on that, growing my own food, not being in bad health conditions, working out, and ultimately, yes, voting libertarian. But that doesn't mean you just say, I voted libertarian.
So many people with a fucking gut telling me, oh, we're going to have a civil war at Boogaloo. My plate carrier can't fit around my fucking stomach, but I'm definitely going to fucking, like, if you don't look like me, at least, fuck off.
So you're not down with Meal Team 6?
Nope. I mean, but here's the thing.
We got gravy seals. But
here's the thing, though. Meal Team 6 was not all fucking fat people, and one of the people there, Ryan Teeter, like got smeared by the press as a Taliban supporter, which I almost certainly guarantee was not true, and is now gone. So I would 100% say that Ryan Teeter and Ryan Teeter's friend was an exception to the rule with Meal Team 6, because what was great about that was that they said that that this was an entirely QAnon-based group of like radical right-wing Nazi people. Ryan Teeter is a bisexual, if I remember trans. I might be misremembering. We were mutuals on Twitter after I stood up for him. So fuck the press and the academia who supports them. Fuck the state, fuck the system, man.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. I want to get rid of the system. I want people to realize whatever they do, if they choose to vote or not, as Crass would say, the only authority is yourself. Or in other words, get out of your own way. I like Penny Rambard's explanation. We gave out pamphlets. In those pamphlets, some things were helpful, some things were interesting. And he said in one chapter, we teach people how to make their own petrol bombs, but then the next one, we show them how to make their own bread. And that's the fun part of all of this.
And also primarily fitness, because if you're not able to like move in an apocalypse, you're a liability to all of us. I'm not saying I'm not trying to be ableist here. I'm not saying, even though I think most cases of ableism are bullshit, I'm not saying that you can't be involved if you are disabled. But what I am saying is that if you can work out and you don't, if you can be fit and you don't, that's a fucking problem, yo.
It is. So that's all I got. Definitely that is my modus operandi, is if you're going to vote. I prefer you vote libertarian or third party, because that's going to be a much better way to mess with the establishment. And just realize that vote doesn't abdicate you. There's still a lot more work to do. Also, you can check me out at Kareem for Liberty and Kareem on Twitter. You can go ahead and just go and check me out on social media. And you can find Jeremiah at Agorist Nexus or Insanity is Free on Twitter, even though Insanity sometimes isn't. And I'm Kareem6633 on Twitter as well. Also, I will be really pushing out the movie Died Suddenly when it comes out, and looking forward to seeing that. All right, guys.